Yo, it's your boy Rodman. To the left of me, my associates, Herb, Nick. Say what's up to the people.
Yo, what is going on? This is Herb from the Couch Bros.
What's up, y'all? It's Nick signing in. Couch Bros in the house.
Alright, y'all. On today's episode, we are tackling another anime. For those of you who are not familiar with it, this one is called Neon Genesis Evangelion. Though I'm sure a lot of you have heard about it. It's pretty much a cult classic in the anime community. And we're gonna delve into, its plot, its characters, what we didn't like, what we like about it. And I'm gonna ask the fellas here, some general thoughts that they have on the series. What you think, Herb?
All right, so the reason why we're doing this podcast is because it's on Netflix, and because it's 2019 and this new generation of media consumption, a lot of people are only getting their media, or whether it's TV or anything like that, through Netflix. So there's a lot of people who have no idea about Neon Genesis Evangelion. Like I said in the last podcast, this is a new generation where you have more people who are into anime as a whole, so they didn't see it in 1995. They didn't watch it on Anime Network. They didn't watch it on Toonami. They didn't watch it on Adult Swim. So their first recollection of it is going to be within the last 2 weeks. So I decided to watch it. I thought it'd be a good idea for an episode. That's why we're doing this podcast right now.
I mean, I thought it was a pretty decent anime. It took me a long time to get into it, I'm not going to lie. I was expecting something completely different than what it was. I had previously not seen it. I am one of the new generation who, this just happened to be one of the ones I hadn't seen. So everything that I saw within the last 2 weeks has been brand new to me, so I'm just going to be giving my fresh opinion on it. And my opinion changed over the course of the series, and it ended up getting better by the end of it, as opposed to how I felt at the start.
Yeah, so you are like the perfect person to have on the podcast. I mean, we're already on the podcast regardless, but this is the best kind of podcast to have because we have the two people who are aware of it, and then you have somebody who isn't aware of it and is watching it from a new perspective. So there's two camps. There's people who really appreciate it, understand what it did for the genre as a whole, and they could acknowledge what was great about it. Like, when I watched it in two different ways. I watched it from a prism of, does it hold up? It's 2019. It came out in 1995. And then I watched it to say, okay, is there things about this that I was like, wow, okay, I get it. Then you have somebody who, like Nick, who just seen it. He might be jaded because his standards of anime is from what he knows now. He could see it and be like, why is this shit so fucking bomb? You know what I'm saying? So, and then you have Rod, who is the perfect blend because you're right dab in the middle. Like, you don't give a fuck. So we all watched it for completely different reasons. So I want to start with Nick. So what did you like about it? What didn't you like about it? Just go ahead and just cook, bro.
All right. So I'm going to preface this by saying my introduction to the mecha anime genre was Mobile Suit Gundam Wing, G Gundam, Mobile Suit Gundam 00. That's the type of anime I had previously seen before watching this. So after the first episode, I assumed this was going to be something like that. Big mech battle, something gets shot, something dies. All right, cool. Wasn't sold on the main character. Wasn't really sold on any character that was encountered, to be honest, but I was going to give it a chance. Throughout the course of the series, I'm not going to lie, there really isn't crazy character development. The action didn't really catch my eye. I expect a little bit more, mostly because of my previous viewing of the Gundam series, where there is both character development and good action. So it was a slow blow, but by the end of the series, there actually is some very good character development. It does only take place in the last 2 episodes, but overall, I like the series because it's a cool concept. It's a new look at the mecha anime, at least from my perspective, because I hadn't seen it before. They gave the Evas almost like an emotional brain to the point where they weren't just machines, which I thought was fucking cool as shit.
All right, and that's pretty much it in a nutshell. So, like, for the people who didn't watch this, because I'm not going to be rude enough to think everybody who's listening to this podcast, even though it's on Netflix, actually watched this. So, just for the people who don't know what it's about, I do have the plot up right now, so I'm just going to go ahead and read. Basically, the plot is, and this is from Wiki, take whatever the fuck you want from that. Hey, who cares? 15 years after a global catalysm known as the Second Impact, teenager Shinji is summoned to the futuristic city of Tokyo 3 by his estranged father, director of a special paramilitary force, NERV. You know what I'm saying? So that just lets you know what you're dealing with. This is going to be elements of cyberpunk. It's going to be elements of future conflict. You know what I'm saying? So basically what happens is they're set in the future. You're thrown into it. You know what I'm saying? Like, the past reveals itself in later episodes. I believe episode 19, there's an episode completely dedicated to the past. It just lets you know how everything developed to that point. But for the most part, you're just thrown into it. You don't know what the fuck's going on. You just accept the world as it is. And the main character is Shinji. Like, when I watched it, I've seen it. I've seen it in 1995. I've seen it in 2000. I've seen it in 2006. This is my 4th or 5th time watching it as a series. I still don't know what the fuck it's about. I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm still confused. But there's things about it that I liked, and there's things about it I didn't like. Like, I'm gonna get into the cons first. Like, my cons about the show, I felt like the tone shift was kind of rapid. It went from a coming of age story where the main character Shinji is confused and he's dealing with the reality of situations he's in. Next thing you know, it's a fucking comedy. Like, for fucking 6 episodes. I'm like, okay, that was weird. It is convoluted. Anybody who says it's convoluted, you're right. Because there's parts I'm just like, bruh, make this shit make sense. Make it make sense.
Yeah.
It definitely didn't need 24 episodes. It could have got off with like 16 and it's great. You know what I'm saying? And yeah, it didn't have to follow the industry standard of 24 episodes. Like, for the most part, any anime that came out in the early, mid-90s, you're getting 24 episodes.
24,
Bebop.
26, yeah.
Bebop, 26. Trigun, 24. This shit, 24. It didn't need 24 episodes to tell the story. You know what I'm saying? It had to. Now, in my opinion, what I felt was great about the anime, and I feel this is why it stands up and this is why it's held in such regard, the world building. There's no world building like it. Even to this day, whether you think it is overrated or not, even in the genre it is, mecha, Gurren Lagann is heavily influenced by Evangelion. Starboy, that's heavily influenced by Evangelion. A lot of the newer mecha animes in general are just influenced by Evangelion. The design, the art direction, the theme. Like, most animes didn't have an adult theme. Like, people weren't dealing with relationships in the anime. People weren't dealing with, damn, what's my place in the world in an anime at that time? You know what I'm saying? Especially from the male character perspective, a male character was never shown the way Shinji was shown. You know what I'm saying? So the sound effects was amazing.
I love the soundtrack.
The soundtracks are crazy. Tension. And my favorite part about it, which still holds up, a lot of the dialogue about the show didn't need words. They could just have a still shot of the characters and that will tell you everything about the scene. So that, in 2019, I still don't think has been recreated from an anime perspective. What you think, Rod?
I mean, I agree, Herb. I mean, for one thing that Neon Genesis did really, really well, they did a great job with the themes they decided to go with. It's a very psychological, philosophical series, you know what I'm saying? It has a lot of religious undertones. And they did a lot of little things that I liked when I was watching. Like, for example, even little things such as episode titles. Like, there's an episode title called The Oral Stage. There's an episode title called Separation Anxiety. That pays homage to Sigmund Freud, who, you know, was a well-known psychologist. You know what I'm saying? What they did with the religious themes, with Adam being the first angel and the whole Lilith concept, it is confusing because they don't really like try to explain how it goes.
They make you work for it.
So what I gather from it is that Adam, they are an alien race, the angels. Adam and Lilith are two creators that ended up on the same planet. So what happens is Adam is the fruit of life and Lilith is the fruit of knowledge, which is why humanity stems from Lilith, which is why it's all based on science. You know, it's a heavily science-influenced society. Whereas the angels they come from the fruit of life, which is like unlimited power, which is why they're just monstrous creatures that have to gain intelligence. So they do a good job, I thought, of, you know, just creating just a unique world. You don't see that in mecha anime. Mecha animes is usually about wars and colonizing and shit like that, but I thought that was interesting. But one thing they did really well was they focused very hard on the psychological profiles of these characters. Like, for example, like Shinji is a timid boy. Like, we are thrown into the story like Shinji is thrown into action. Like, Shinji's thrown into the story. Shinji's like, yo, you know, he has a bad relationship with his dad. His father abandoned him. And a lot of the characters, they have a lot of psychological problems that stem from their parents. Misako in the beginning of the series, she's Shinji's caretaker, and she's one of the majors and commanders at the base. When you get introduced to her, she can't stand Shinji because he's a whiny, timid kid. She's just like, oh my God, like, why are you such a pussy? You know what I'm saying? But over time, she has also problems with her father because her father didn't really show her any love until he saved her from being killed. She didn't talk for 2 years after that. She was traumatized. So she starts to develop, she kind of starts to see herself in Shinji. And that's the one thing, you know, I couldn't stand Shinji at first because he, you know, timid main characters always get on my nerves, the whole quiet, like, oh, I'm sorry type dude. But he grows a little by little throughout the series. He gains a little bit of confidence. And his relationships with people, you kind of start to see how he relates to everybody else. Like Asuka. Like, she is, for those of you who don't watch the series, Asuka is the bitch on the squad. Like, bro, like Nick, how many times were we watching the series where we were just like, damn, bro, we just wish she was shut up. You know what I'm saying? But the thing with Asuka is she's another person. Her mother committed suicide. And the thing with Asuka is she tries to distract herself from that by being the snottiest, most freaking obnoxious person there is. And the only thing she has to her name is piloting an Eva.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I thought they did a really good job with focusing on the psychological aspects of the character. And when you go towards the end of the series, they do something called the Human Instrumentality Project, which is basically sort of like them all combining. It's like a whole bunch of people combining into one conscious. I know Nick knows better about it.
When I watched this, I was extremely confused, so I spent several hours doing research on this because I hate not understanding what's going on when I watch a show. The Human Instrumentality Project was essentially what's called the third impact, the third cataclysmic event. It's something that was worked toward by both the angels and the humans throughout the entire series. When it does finally happen, it essentially takes every single human consciousness and combines it into one shared space. Now this, in theory, could be very good or bad. There are two different organizations that are vying to make this happen. They both want it to happen, but for different reasons. And then the series ends with basically Shinji's decision, because it comes down to his decision. The Human Instrumentality Project is instigated through his Eva, and it's his decision on whether or not he wants to maintain unified with everyone or split back into separate personality. Now, there's various different interpretations of how he decides to go about this. They made a movie after the series came out that offers a different, much darker interpretation, but that's basically it. It molds everyone together so that there can be no more strife, no more conflict, no more war, no more fear, no more anxiety.
Basically like forming one into a god.
Yeah, it's godhood. It's attempting to turn the human race into one single godlike entity.
Yeah, y'all got it. Yeah, y'all definitely got it. Yo, y'all watched a whole different anime than I did. I was just watching niggas fight, yo. Y'all really did a deep dive, but that's the coolest part about it. Like, that's why I tell people, like, people who watched it, they were underwhelmed by it, it's because they went into it expecting typical dichotomy. So that is, this giant machine fights that giant machine, one of these giant machines blows up, and that person wins. It has nothing to do with that. You know what I'm saying? It is deeper than that. There's religious undertones behind it. It is about, basically what Nick was explaining is, the whole point of that was, there's too many people on this planet Earth with too many different ideologies, too many different diversions of what they believe in. What if we have one unified belief and one unified conscience? What if we start it over? That's basically what it was. It was, we fucked this shit up. We fucked this planet. We fucked the gift that this was. Let's start this over. That's the third impact. That means it happens twice. You know what I'm saying? So Go ahead, Nick. I think when you say something.
Well, what I was going to say is, as I mentioned, there were two organizations trying to make this happen. One was called SEAL and one was called NERV. Rodney mentioned NERV before. NERV is the paramilitary organization that Shinji works for that has control of the Evas. SEAL wanted to achieve human instrumentality in order to create the godlike entity. They essentially despised humanity and felt like it was time for it to end and something new be created. Their goal was to have human instrumentality remain intact and be the future. NERV's goal, which is to say Shinji's father's goal, he keeps it secret from everyone until the very end, is to have everyone mold into one consciousness so that they can understand each other and then split back into individual beings with a new outlook and a new understanding of the people around them. That's basically the two outcomes that can happen. It all ends up being Shinji's decision, and one thing I will say that I really liked about the show, and Herbie mentioned this earlier, there are very few animes, at least this type of anime, that deals so deeply with personal issues. This is a 12-year-old boy who has ridiculous abandonment issues. Mm-hmm. He has no self-worth. He has social anxiety, and he is constantly questioning whether or not he should even be alive at 12 years old. And that is a main theme throughout the entire series, is how completely worthless in his quest to find self-worth. And he ends up attributing that to praise from his father, which he never received. And every other character as well, not necessarily in that same situation, but they are all deeply flawed, anxious individuals. Rod mentioned Asuka, who puts on this air. The only thing she has in her life is the fact that she can pilot an Ava, and she prides herself on winning fights. So when she first loses a fight, it shakes her to her core. The next time she's put into combat, she acts recklessly to prove herself because she's never lost before. She ends up being defeated again and saved by Shinji, someone who she looks down upon for his timid nature and his lack of self-worth. This completely destroys her psyche, and you have now a teenage girl who has completely lost her sense of self in an already fucked up world. And it's just every single character is so deeply flawed, and I'm not gonna lie to you and say that all these flaws are fixed or even completely addressed throughout the course of the series, but that by itself was such a new ground for me, and this is me seeing it in 2019. I've seen several animes, I've been watching anime for years. This was still new to me today, which I think is pretty fucking amazing.
I don't even feel like I should be a part of this, dog. I'm just looking at the cool colors, bro. Like, y'all was really, really watching this shit, bro.
No, I mean, this is the first time that I've gotten the chance, because the first time I watched it, I was like in like high school, bro.
Yep.
So just like her, bro. The first time I'm watching it, when I watched it all the way through the end, I was confused. Like, I didn't even remember much about it. So watching it now was kind of like watching it for the first time. And this time I wanted to really pay attention to it. Because when I was younger, I was looking for different things. Because like Nick said, we come from I prefer, if you ask me, if you put Neon Genesis and Gundam Wing on the table, I'm picking Gundam Wing every time for my personal preference. So, when I was younger watching it, that's what I was expecting, even though I liked it. Now I got a chance to take a look at what it did differently than Gundam Wing. What it was able to introduce, what elements it was able to introduce to the mecha genre, the giant monster genre. So
now you mentioned what's the creator's name again?
Hideaki Anno.
Okay, so Hideaki Anno. So what I was reading, and this completely speaks to what you just said. The whole point of this anime, the whole point of Neon Genesis Evangelion was, in his words, and I quote, the deconstruction of mecha anime. You know what I'm saying? Like, that was by design. His purpose was to say mecha anime is deeper than this. Like, there's so many things that we can explore. Like, we're putting people in machines that can destroy thousands of land in a second. Why are we just looking at who wins and who loses? Let's look at how this affects the people that are inside the machines. Let's make the machines actually have a telekinetic response to the people. Like, if something happens to the arm of the machine, the person feels that too. Like, it's deeply connected. You know what I'm saying? So, like, and then I remember how we were talking about in the pre-show meetings where you said that he went through a divorce, right?
Yeah, his wife left him and he went through a depression. He had a long life battle with depression, which is why Shinji is kind of like somewhat, and oftentimes with authors, Shinji is an extension of him. Like, Shinji is a part of who he is. And oftentimes, many characters of the story are like that. So you can see those elements in the storytelling that, that he was doing.
And you notice as the story goes on and evolves, Shinji breaks down more and more. A lot of times you will see throughout the course of an anime, a character grows in a positive way. Shinji just keeps getting broken down layer by layer by layer until the very end.
So now, I've heard people say, put like this, to anybody who doesn't like it or whatever, like, what would you say? Like, what are you acknowledging somebody who watches it and they just don't get none of that shit? They have no emotional connection to this. They're like, why is this shit popular? Like, yo, what's the big deal with this? Like, what do you have to say to people like that?
What I would say to someone like that is, I will say, it's definitely not everybody's cup of tea. Like, Neon Genesis Evangelion is, if you're looking for something that's gonna be more thought-provoking than you would have wanted, then give it a shot. You know what I mean? It's not something that's gonna, if you're looking for action, if you're looking for, the stereotypical tropes that Gundam animes have, you're not gonna enjoy yourself. But if you want a story that's gonna kind of delve into the psychological profile of just a small group of people who we didn't even get a chance to really delve into all the characters, and we don't have to.
Oh no, go ahead, let's do it. Like, put like this. This entire episode is dedicated to Evangelion. Like, I don't even know who's your favorite character.
If I had a favorite character in the series, honestly, this is a show I didn't really have a favorite character. To be told, I didn't really care for a lot of them like that. I liked Misako, you know what I'm saying? She was cool, but I guess I would say Kaji. You know what I'm saying? The resident player. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that dude was an asshole, bro.
He wasn't. Yeah.
I like Toji, bro.
Oh no, Toji was cool, and that's the thing. They put Shinji through a lot of crap. Like, Shinji's dad, Gendo Ikari, he's an asshole. Like, this man was involved with something. This man had his hand in everybody's. Ray was like a soul. She's like
Ray was I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
Ray was a clone that was made from the DNA of Gendo's wife, Shinji's mother, Yui, and flesh taken from Lilith. Lilith being the creator of knowledge, who the human race is based off of. So essentially taking a piece of the original E and using that DNA to create someone. And they managed to create this girl, and they just made a shit ton of clones with her, and they essentially just, every time she would die in combat, they would just activate another clone. And they would just use this army of child soldiers without any sort of remorse, without worrying about the psychological development of each clone when it was awakened, none of that. So honestly, you saying Gendo is fucked up? Every single adult that is involved in any way with nerve is fucked up on a very deep level. Anyone who is okay with putting children in war machines to fight giant fucking monsters, and then not even fucking, there was no psychological help for these children. They fucking got in the machines, they fought the monsters, they almost died, they watched their friends die, and then they just got sent right back to fucking high school. There was no fucking debriefing. There was no emotional support for these 12-year-old children who just murdered people.
Right.
Nothing.
And that's the thing. And you know, sometimes in anime they kind of just they throw in a main character and make them high school. But one thing I like that they did in Evangelion, there's actually a reason why that they had teenagers pilot those Evas, and that's because the Evas that they used had some of their mother's DNA, which is why at times in the series when one of the other kids would try to pilot another Eva, it was not compatible. Which is why that's the reason why Shinji could only pilot Unit 1, why Asuka could only pilot Unit 2. It's because they drew from some of their parents' DNA.
Which is also why Rei could pilot Shinji's Eva, because Shinji's Eva was powered by the soul of his dead mother.
Right.
Rei was built with DNA from his mother.
Right.
So just hearing you guys talk about it, it just made me just see it from a completely different perspective. You know what I'm saying? Like me, when I was watching it, I didn't really go into it with all the undertones and all the internal conflict that might be placed on the people. You know what I'm saying? I was just watching it like, why does this hold up? But to hear a completely different conversation that I didn't have with myself just shows you like this shit's 20 years strong. Like it's held in such regard because of what you just said, what I just said, what Nick just said, his interpretation, your interpretation, my interpretation. You know what I'm saying? Like you took from the internal personal conflict between the characters. You took from the philosophical, the ideology of it. I took from the art direction, the style of it, the aesthetic. There's so many different reasons why this show keeps coming back every 5 or so years. Why they could keep putting this shit back on themselves. Why they could keep putting box DVD specials of it. Because it's going to introduce new characters, new fans to the genre as a whole. You know what I'm saying? Like I said, this came out in 1995. Whether you liked it or not, there was nothing like this in 1995. Absolutely nothing. Like one of my favorite movies that came out about 2, 3, 4 years ago, Pacific Rim. When I watched it now, cognizant of what Pacific Rim was about, I'm like, oh, that's just fucking Evangelion influence. How everybody that's inside the fucking mechs have to have a telekinetic link to the fucking things. I'm like, oh, that's Evangelion. Like
monsters coming out of the sea.
Monsters coming out of the sea. That's Evangelion. You know what I'm saying? Like that shit came out 20 years after Evangelion came out. So that just shows you the staying power of what a great anime can have, what great storytelling can have, what great ideas can have. You know what I'm saying? Like no matter what the medium is, whether that shit was in a fucking book, whether that shit was in a regular fucking movie with regular actors, the execution was flawless. You know what I'm saying? Like I said, there's parts of it I didn't like, but the overall idea of it, the audacity of it, like the creator could have made something easy. He could have just, like I said, he could have just put some giant fucking people in some giant fights, bunch of explosions, and been that. That would have just been another run-of-the-mill anime. And it might have survived too, but he said, I want to use these resources to make something iconic. I want to use these resources I have to make something timeless. You know what I'm saying? So I always look out and I always appreciate artists and creators who do that. You know what I'm saying? So to the people who's listening, this isn't to dick ride Evangelion by any means. Like, nigga, I was falling asleep for some of the episodes.
Right.
Don't get it twisted. But when something great comes along, when something great is given to us, let's just acknowledge it. That's what this episode is about or whatnot. So anybody, y'all got some closing words for Evangelion? Like, how did we said all of this, but we never really explained how we personally felt. So let's just give our personal opinions and then we go ahead and check out.
You know what? now that we've had the conversation, I've had time to sit here and stew and think about it. It was definitely a good ride. You know what I mean? It deserves definitely a lot of the love it gets. It's a cult classic for a reason, and I can say I enjoyed it. It starts slow, and I think the slow pacing. We live in an era now where anime is a lot faster paced. Like, we're not from the, this ain't the Dragon Ball era where they dragging, takes 5 episodes to screw a light in. You know what I'm saying? But overall, I enjoyed it. It was a good ride.
I pretty much agree with that. It started very slow. I told Rodney when we started watching it, I don't know if I'm going to make it through this. But through the course of the episodes, I actually really enjoyed not necessarily any real character development, but just the characters that were presented. I felt a really big connection with Shinji. I've dealt with depression, bipolar disorder, and post-traumatic stress disorder myself. And it was really, really nice to see a character who wasn't sure of themselves.
And me, like I said, when I went into it, I had 2 objectives. I watched it. I didn't watch it to see if I was going to enjoy it. I watched it to see why it was popular, and I watched it to see does it hold up, and it did both of those things. So at the end of the day, I did definitely enjoy the ride. Did it need all 24 episodes or 26 if you want to count the behind the scenes? Hell no. Fuck no. But it's bigger than that. You know what I'm saying? It did what it was supposed to do. It did what it was set out to do. It was the deconstruction of the mecha genre, and no anime that has been produced by that genre couldn't even come close to it. So like I said, to the people who haven't watched it, go ahead and watch it. Whether you're an anime fan or not, if we explained it and we broke it down this way, you might enjoy it a different way. And if you want to go ahead and watch it again, go ahead. So we're going to go ahead and check out. Y'all boys.
It's your boy Rod, man. It's always a pleasure to be on the pod with the fellas, to talk to the people. Signing out.
This is Nick here signing out. Thanks for coming.
And this is Herb with the Couch Boys. Deuces.
Deuce.